Hello, everyone. I am excited to chat with you all today on Milky Mama Monday about milk composition, human milk composition. So I'm just going to give it a few seconds here because there's always that lag with FaceTime Live when it tells me I'm live and when I'm actually live. So I'm just going to give it a second here to catch up and to see if anybody can join us live today. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I am a mom, just like you amazing ladies, and nap time was a little bit of a struggle with baby today. So I was a few minutes late than I intended to be, so hopefully that didn't mess too much things up for people who wanted to join me live. As always, I'm going to post this in the group after the live recorded session, so if you do catch the replay, do me a favor and drop hashtag replay for me. Let me know that you're catching it later, what you think of the content. I'm always happy to hear what you learned and maybe something new that surprised you in any of these trainings. I try to not only just educate in this segment, I also try to bust at least one myth. Bust a myth, get it? Breastfeeding. Um, when I do these trainings, I try to combat a lot of the misinformation that can be out there when it comes to breastfeeding and really want you all to be informed about this incredible way that we can bond with our children and nourish them if it's the way that we choose. Formula feeding is also a wonderful option as well. But I like to provide the information on breastfeeding if it's something that you're interested in. All right, that should have been enough time for us to let the video load. And if you are joining me live, I'd love to say hello. Tell me you're here, where you're coming in from. I'm going to try to be able to watch the comments for any questions, but my goal is to try to keep this very short and succinct, so I might not do a lot of Q&A live, but I'll circle back around to the comments if I miss them during the live recording. So today's topic is human milk composition, and I just want to preface this with the disclaimer that this is an incredibly complex topic. It is wide-reaching and it will not be covered in its entirety during this training. My goal is to really talk about very high-level milk composition in this particular training, and I'd like to dive into some of the other interesting and fascinating facts around breast milk composition in later trainings, if that's something that is of interest for you all. But today I'm really going to be focusing on more of the macro pieces of human milk. And more specifically, I'm going to be talking about foremilk and hindmilk. And I'm also going to be tackling a couple of the myths that is around foremilk and hindmilk. And I'm also going to just briefly touch on kind of the compared to other mammals, how human breast milk is different and why that's closely connected to the way we feed our babies and how often we are nursing. So with that in mind, I want to dive right in, and I wanted to start out with letting everyone be on the same page around kind of just the background on human milk and where we are compared to other mammalian animals, and kind of how that's tied to our nursing cadence. So human milk is one of the highest lactose containing milks of all of the mammalian milks that we know of. It's very high in water, and comparatively it is low in protein and fat. So we have a very dilute milk compared to other animals. And why that's important to understand and to know is because that's why we as nursing parents have to ensure we are nursing frequently for our little ones, because in other animals and other species, it's very interesting because they have a very high fat content. I can't think of any off the top of my head. That should have been something I checked before I got on live here, but I've read some really interesting research on other mammals that have very, very high fat content. And so they don't need to nurse their young as often as we do. So that's why it is so crucial that we have a baby-led feeding cadence with our kids. And so we need to make sure that we're not on some sort of time schedule or anything like that when it comes to nursing. We need to be following our baby's hunger cues and nursing frequently, especially in the very, very beginning, because not only does that satiate their feeding requirements, but it also helps bring in our milk, and it helps really just help with the milk. What am I trying to say? The different types of milk. I'm not going to go a whole lot into that. That's a whole nother training around like the difference between colostrum and more mature milk and stuff like that. But the nursing frequency does help with us at the very early beginning make those changes from colostrum to more mature milk, as well as ensuring our littles are getting enough food. And so it also is important to note that just because we have lower fat content, lower protein, high water, and high lactose does not mean that it's an inferior milk. It means that it is exactly what our babies need. When we have high lactose, it's a sugar, and it is the perfect fuel to help us really feed our baby's growing and rapidly developing brain. And so it's the perfect brain food for our babies. So I just wanted to kind of cover that because I thought that was so interesting. And it's important for us to know the whys behind, frequently nursing other than just bringing in our milk. It's also because of our baby's energy requirements. All right, so an interesting thing that I like to talk about when it comes to milk composition is our human milk changes, the composition of it changes within a feed, within the day, and over the course of lactation overall. And so breast milk really is fascinating how it changes and adapts to what our baby needs. So that's also why it's impossible for us to obtain a single representation of a sample of milk when we're doing a lot of research and we're reading all of that. It's constantly changing, and so it really makes that difficult to try to have the perfect sample of breast milk that says this is what it all contains. And that's why we're always finding and discovering new things that is in our breast milk. All right, really quickly, the last thing that I wanted to cover in this particular training, like I said, I'm going to be doing another, probably a part 2 breast milk composition where we dive into more of the microbiome of breast milk because I think that's so fascinating, and it's something that we're learning more and more about, but we don't know everything about it, and we probably never really will have a complete understanding of it because it is just such a fascinating and complex issue. Not issue, but area of study, I should say. But today I wanted to go over foremilk and hindmilk because I think it's a very important thing for us to know because there's a lot of misconceptions floating around when it comes to foremilk and hindmilk. And it's way more complex than we originally thought. So in the research, milk produced at the beginning of a feed is called the foremilk, and the milk that is that comes out at the end of a feed is called the hindmilk. So just as a kind of a brief definition for you for what those two terms mean. So what I hear a lot about is that foremilk it gets compared to the hindmilk as being inferior a lot of times. When I'm in mom groups or I'm talking to nursing moms that are concerned, oh, I think the baby's getting too much foremilk. I think that he's not getting enough of the hindmilk. And the reason why they think this is a problem is because there is this misconception out there that hindmilk is fattier than foremilk. And interestingly enough, the more recent research actually has shown us that that's not necessarily true. So it is commonly thought that hind milk contains more fat than foremilk, but it actually doesn't sometimes. Sometimes they can actually be equal, which is very fascinating. So I want to challenge you with your thinking and to not assume that foremilk is low fat and that high milk is high fat, because sometimes, like I said, they can be equal. Um, I just want to catch up on my notes here, make sure I didn't miss anything with that. Yes, so please, please, please don't try to, work it in a way where you're nursing, where you're trying to encourage your infant to consume more hind milk because you're worried or you think that there is more nutrition in that hind milk than in the foremilk. That's really unnecessary. Um, so, the fat content of our human milk really varies actually throughout the day. And when something that I want to point out to that is more relevant than knowing the foremilk and hind milk is that when lactose and volume are high in our milk composition, our fat is lower and vice versa. So that's the actual relationship of the fat content versus the lactose and water content. And so another important thing to understand is that the composition of milk can also change by the way it's actually removed from the breast. So the faster of the milk removal, the faster and more efficient baby is at emptying the breast, this actually increases the fat content in the actual milk. And so longer feeding times, so when we are feeding babies at the breast for longer than 30 minutes, that's actually associated with lower levels of milk transfer overall, and it can actually cause the baby to be burning more calories than they are consuming. And so that's also why it's really important that we encourage shorter nursing time frames, so less than 30 minutes, because you really don't want baby to be burning more energy than they are taking in. And so if you are struggling with longer nursing sessions, so anything that's over the 30 minutes, we really want to evaluate what's going on. Is there an issue with the milk transfer from baby? Do we have a latch problem? So those are all things that you can work with me or a lactation consultant on with trying to pinpoint what exactly is going on to make sure that your baby is getting what they need and that you're not having these long drawn out nursing sessions that are actually not beneficial in the long run for you or babe. So there was a lot of information that I wanted to cover in a short amount of time, and there's so, so, so much more to this topic. It's so fascinating because breast milk is really more than just nutrition. It is nutrition, but it also has just a fascinating array of just all sorts of antibodies and other amazing things that is in our breast milk that really makes up this unique microbiome for our baby. And there's so much research that is coming out about that, and it's super interesting and exciting. So another training, I'd like to dive in a little bit to what we do know from the research when it comes to that. But for this particular session, I just wanted to focus on the foremilk and hind milk and really the overall composition of those macronutrients that are found within our human breast milk. And if you guys have any questions over anything that I've covered today, please drop them below in the comments. I'd love to address those. If you have any interesting things that you have learned maybe along the way, or if you want to know if it's true or woo, as I like to say, when it comes to breast milk composition, drop those below too, and we can get a conversation started, or you can just throw it in the group in general as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. It is Memorial Day, so take a moment to really honor those who have served our country. This is obviously in the US here, and I hope that you have a very safe and fun weekend with your family, but I do encourage you to take a pause and reflect over those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. So I hope I get to see you all in the group, and drop those questions and comments below.